On this week's episode, I'm joined by Cherie Mitchell. Cherie is the founder and president of Immersive Global. Cherie is originally from Miami, Florida, but her home and her heart is right here in Portugal. We discuss, amongst other things, the beauty and the diversity of Portugal. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, The Simple Life. I'm really delighted to be joined here by Cherie Mitchell. Cherie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're sitting in your office in Lisbon?
Yes, I am.
How is everything in Lisbon?
Today, it's a gorgeous day. Everything's awesome.
Wonderful. Cherie, we're going to get into so much information on this podcast, on this episode. I'm really excited to chat about certain things with you, but maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about you.
Sure. My name is Cherie Mitchell. I'm originally from Florida in the U.S., and I consider myself a global citizen. I love Portugal. I've lived in Spain, so this is not my first time in the Iberian Peninsula. I've also lived in Latin America. And I feel really at home here, so I'm happy to be in Portugal.
Wonderful. Can we go back a little bit? And I'm always curious about the relationship for Americans and Portugal. It's a relationship that's developing at a rapid pace at the moment, as you all know because of your business. But how did it start for you? How did you first discover Portugal?
Sure. So Portugal, when I used to live in Spain, Portugal obviously was always nearby. And I've taken a couple of day trips over, but I really didn't connect with it at that time. Fast forward about 10 years, and my brother and I had an ambitious plan to travel around Europe together. And we ended up in Portugal for probably like a 48-hour stop. And I remembered it much more than I did when I was living in Spain. And then fast forward about 10 more years, I did a 14-month around the world trip by myself, kind of in between careers and in between life phases. Ended up in Portugal because I needed to fly down to Angola for a wedding, and the best direct flight that I could find was from Lisbon. So I came to Lisbon for 2 weeks prior to going down to Angola and just fell in love with it. The city, from the first day that I arrived, resonated with me and just really spoke to me in a way that other countries and places had not. So I made a promise to come back after I traveled around Africa. And at that time when I came back, I spent the full 3 months, which is what Americans are allowed in the European Union, a full 90 days in Portugal. And I knew that I was going to end up making this place either part-time home or a full-time home. I would definitely have some connection, professional and personal, to Portugal from that point on.
Amazing. So, when was that exactly that you came for those 3 months?
Yeah, so that was back in 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were those things that grabbed you back then? Well, actually, maybe you can start with, what did you know about Portugal leading up to those first couple of excursions?
Sure. I knew that Portugal, I'm from Miami. So in Miami, we don't have a large Portugal community, but we do have some Portuguese people living there that I had the opportunity to interact with prior to discovering Portugal on my own. So I knew that there were a lot of similarities between the Portuguese culture and the Spanish culture. So I had an idea that it would be an easy transition for me since I had already lived in Spain. I spoke fluent Spanish, and even though Spanish and Portuguese are two different languages, the Spanish does give you a base, kind of a step above everyone else when you're learning Portuguese. So I expected that it would be an easy transition, and it was. And the things that really stood out to me were how colorful Lisbon is. Sunlight, especially to a Floridian, is extremely important. And here in Portugal, I felt at home because Lisbon is such a bright, sunny, gorgeous city. And I really appreciated how multicultural it was. So as a person of mixed race, it was important to feel at home at whatever place I decided to spend time in. And so here in Portugal, from the very beginning, people just automatically assumed that I was a local. So that's always welcoming. And I loved the food. I love the food still, and especially the wine. I'm a big wine fanatic, or I wouldn't say connoisseur, but I'm definitely a person who appreciates really good wine. And here in Portugal, I fell in love with the variety and also the quality to price ratio.
Yeah, the wine is amazing. We've had a couple of winemakers on the show. Actually, we've got a lot of crossovers that we've started to realize since we've been speaking. We've both spoken to the same wine producers previously. We've also happened to speak to the same pastry chef, old João Battaglia.
Yes, that's right.
What a great guy. João was also on one of our episodes of the podcast. Where's your favorite wine region? Which is your favorite wine region?
So that's constantly evolving. Back in 2015, after those first 3 months, I came back again, and I worked on a project in conjunction with the New York Times travel show. Okay. And it was specifically building out wine tourism products for affluent Americans who wanted to travel to Portugal. And the region that gave me a lot of support and I really fell in love with was the Alentejo. So that was my first intro, deep dive into Portuguese wine was down in the Alentejo. And I have my favorite wineries there. But after that, I've had the opportunity to discover Portuguese wine throughout other regions as well. And I have my favorites everywhere, even in the Açores, in Pico.
In Pico, yeah. Oh, wonderful. No, it's difficult to choose. I've always, now since doing the podcast, I can't nail my colors to the mast because I'll upset people. But yeah, Alentejo wine is phenomenally good. And what about pastries? Which is your favorite, your favorites?
I try to stay away from pastries if possible because they're so good.
It's possible.
It's really difficult. They are all so amazing. I would say probably my favorite when I do allow myself to have pastries are the ones found in Sintra. Okay. Up to this point, I think those are my favorite. The travasseiros.
Okay, very nice, very nice. Yeah, there's I actually had a lady on the podcast before you who she lives in Sintra and she loves the fofinhos, you know, the little fluffy ones with the cream inside. Yeah. So I mean, we could do a whole podcast just about pastries, and we did. We could do more actually. So yes, but with your sort of pre ideas of what Portugal was, and then coming and starting to blend in and starting to become a local, what are some of the things that surprised you about Portugal?
What really surprised me was how much of a small town feel you get here in Lisbon. And that's something that I'm not used to. In Miami, it's such a huge city. And there are other areas in South Florida that kind of blend into Miami. So it just feels like this mega urban center. When I arrived to Lisbon and actually started spending time here, I would run into people who knew me. And they would always offer to help if I needed advice on, the best restaurants or hotels or even wineries to visit. And I just felt that people were so welcoming and there was this network of support that you could depend on at any moment. And so coming from the US and used to like the hustle and bustle, that was a really nice change of pace. And I guess just the sense of community here really resonated with me as well, which I didn't anticipate because I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going from one major city to a European capital. I expected for it to be very much the same, and it's not.
So the pace is just completely slower compared to what you were expecting for a city.
Yeah. People actually have time to live. And that's something very, very important to me now.
And I mean, besides work, you're living in Lisbon. Mm-hmm. and a lot of that's because of work, but what are some of the other reasons why you decided that this is, I mean, probably some of the things you've already mentioned, but what were the main things that made you stay, that made you think, okay, I want to settle and live here?
The transition to living in Portugal was gradual. I was back and forth between Miami and Portugal for the first 3.5 years, and finally decided to move here in 2018, late 2018. And so there were a lot of different things to consider. As an American citizen, it's not as easy for us to just move to Portugal full time as it is for Europeans. And so there were visa issues to figure out, and a lot of other just things to tie up before I could make the complete transition over to Portugal. Lisbon for me has been the main option because we have the international airport here that has many direct connections back to the US, and also with other European cities and with other places around the world, to be honest with you. So for work purposes, Lisbon up until this point has been, the primary destination. I love other places around Portugal, and I get to visit them whenever possible. But Lisbon is home within Portugal.
Wonderful. Where would you live if you didn't have to be in Lisbon?
I think I would always
Other
have
options?
a flat. Yeah, I would always have at least a flat here in Lisbon because I really, really, really love this city. But I would also have a flat up in Porto. I would have maybe a small little country house in the Douro, and I would have something down on Costa Vicentina.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Okay, so it's difficult to choose just one.
It is,
and they're all so different. The places are so diverse, and it's amazing. How did you go from sort of visiting here and then wanting to introduce people to Portugal?
Sure. So that was the idea from the beginning. When I realized that I'd fallen in love with it, I knew that it would be easy to sell Portugal to other travelers in the US who resonate with the things that I enjoy. So I started curating travel over 17 years ago in Costa Rica. So down in Central America, that was my first destination of making these like tailor-made immersion programs for people who are interested in learning Spanish and immersing themselves in the local culture. So the idea was to duplicate that same type of program here in Portugal. So I thought there would be a market for people who are interested in learning Portuguese and perhaps even staying with Portuguese families and homestay programs that we see a lot in Latin America. That product didn't necessarily work out. There was not a market for that. However, I had the idea, based on a couple of previous clients' feedback, to package food and wine experiences, very authentic and exclusive experiences where people would meet winemakers and have these really neat culinary experiences with some of the local professionals here in Portugal. And that was pretty much, it opened the doors to so many different opportunities in tourism, and we've even been able to use tourism kind of as a vehicle for other types of connections. We recently hosted a delegation of 28 people from the city of Miami Beach here in Portugal, in Cascais, and we were able to help with the twinning process, sister city process of connecting Cascais and Miami Beach officially. So we're looking forward to more projects where we can use our connections here in Portugal, our knowledge in Portugal as an American destination management company, with all of the amazing things that this country has to offer to other Americans who are interested in checking it out.
Well, what are those? I mean, it's we were speaking about it earlier. It's becoming a massively popular place for Americans, both from tourism perspective, but also to come and live. Mm-hmm. What are those things that Portugal offers to Americans that's attracting them so much, in your opinion?
When I talk about Portugal in tourism conferences, and I know the question goes beyond tourism, but I'll start here first. I mentioned 5 things. One, you have great diversity and such a small country, as we were talking about earlier when you asked me where would I like to live if I could have a place anywhere, right? Um, I'm in Lisbon now, but if I just drive 2 hours south, it's as if I'm in a completely different country. Or if I were to drive 2 hours north, depending on if I were to go in the interior or on the coast, it feels like a completely different country as well, right? So coming from such a huge country, such as the US, to be able to have such amazing diversity in topography and culture, even in gastronomy and wine, is a really big plus for us, because we are definitely not afraid of a 2.5 hour, 3 hour road trip just to go eat at a restaurant and then turn around and come back home, right? So I know that that's something that really sticks out to American visitors who come here. And Portugal is one of the top 5 most peaceful countries in the world. And there's a lot to be said about that. If you value peace, such as me, then this is definitely a place that would resonate with you.
Can I stop you there just for a sec, Shri? I don't want you to lose your train of thought. We're on number 2 now, which is the peaceful side. What does that mean? I mean, everyone has their idea of peace. For me, it's a quiet morning where my kids aren't throwing tantrums is peace. But what would you? Why is Portugal peaceful for Americans? What is it that makes it peaceful for them? If you can maybe shed some light on that.
Yeah. Well, I guess we all define it differently. I would say that peace is living in a place where you don't necessarily feel such tension. And over the past few years, I think that it's safe to say that the U.S. has been going through a very interesting phase where things have gotten really tense. And a lot of the Americans who are reaching out to us, even though we're not providing relocation services, but the ones who are reaching out to us and asking me as an American expat living in Portugal, what's it like? Is it dangerous? My response is it has nothing to do with anything that you may have experienced in the United States. It's a completely different ballgame. Yes, you still have to take certain precautions, like you perhaps would not want to leave your handbag in your car unlocked. You may want to lock your door in the evenings, maybe, depending on where you are.
It depends. It depends where you are. Exactly.
Depends on where you are. If you're maybe in the city centers, you might want to do that. But it's nothing like what we're used to, right? So I think that's how I would define peace. I would say that you have peace of mind. You can go out for a walk without having to feel fearful or be worried if you're crossing into like the wrong neighborhood. That's never been my experience here ever. And I'm a very independent person. I do a lot of things by myself, and I've never had a problem in Portugal ever. So that's the peace that I'm alluding to.
For me as a South African, the safety factor is huge, and it's still something that surprises me, and I still have to pinch myself sometimes how safe I am and how safe my kids are here. It's massive. But we talk about these sort of I think when you consider things in America, things in the UK, you talk about those basic level, crime and am I safe walking in the streets? And these things are all clear in Portugal. You're safe. It's a calm. But I think there's that little level below which you were referring to, and I've seen it in the language of people is things like here, you talk to your neighbors. There's no animosity. It doesn't matter what your political affiliation is. It doesn't matter what your religion is here. People just accept, and there's none of that animosity and that the tension. You said the word tension, and that for me is something that's just there under the surface in Portugal, but so part of the fabric that makes it peaceful.
Yes.
Do you find the same thing?
Yes, I agree. And I had a very unique experience because for about 3.5 years, I was living between Portugal. I was coming here for work to build out the tourism products that I mentioned earlier. And I would hop on a plane and fly back home to Miami. And so I really got a very unique experience where I could kind of compare how I felt in both environments, right? And so when I would get back home to South Florida, I could feel the tension again because there's just so much energy. And yeah, I love South Florida. I love Miami, and I will always be connected to that area as well. But in this particular phase in my life, it just feels better and it's more conducive to the types of projects that I have planned, to be in a space where I can relax and I don't feel so anxious just hopping in the car and going to the grocery store as I did before, or even going to a movie theater, right? So these are all things that for me have become top priorities on the list of things that I want for my life right now. And Portugal is ticking them all off. So it's, look, there's no perfect place, as we can all agree. We could definitely talk about maybe some of the shortcomings to living here. But for the most part, the most important things, such as safety and such as peace, such as quality of life, Portugal has met those expectations. It's actually surpassed them.
Yeah. I think people in Miami are so angry because they've got such a bad football team. The Dolphins haven't done well for a long time since Dan Marino. But yeah, we won't go there. Okay. What were the other? So we were on 2. You're talking about peaceful. There's still another 3.
Yes.
So got fire away.
Right. So number 3, I mentioned with the direct connections that we have to many U.S. markets, and TAP Air Portugal, which is the national airline of Portugal, has been very influential in connecting Lisbon and Porto with a lot of places in the United States. So, knowing that you can just hop on a flight, if you're on the East Coast of US, you can hop on a flight and within 7 hours, be in Lisbon is a really big advantage. And so that level of connection that we have, not just with the US, but also with other places in the world. In less than 4 or 5 hours, you're in Northern Africa. You can be in any other European capital in very little time. So the connectivity and the fact that we are the most Western country in continental Europe really makes a difference. It's really easy to work in the US, as I do, virtually from Lisbon. There's a 5-hour difference between Lisbon and the East Coast. There's, I suppose, a certain portion of the year, which we're about to come into, well, there's a 4-hour difference. So it's between 4 to 5 hours, the difference between the East Coast and Lisbon. And it's really easy to continue to trade and to do business, even if you are physically located here. So number 4 would be the quality of the food and wine, which we've talked about before. One of the things that we mention to our guests before they come over is that, if you've traveled to Spain or if you've traveled to Italy or to France, those beautiful 3 or 4 course dinners that you're used to, and you're paying maybe 40, 50 euros for, you will save a lot of money. The same quality of food, if not better. Here in Portugal, you're paying at least 25% less. So your dollar goes much further here. And the last one is the people. Number 5 would definitely be just how amazing the Portuguese people are. So I think it may have been either TAP or it may have even been the tourism board of Portugal that used to have the phrase com os braços abertos, like with your arms wide open. That's how they receive people, and it really does speak to your experience here as a tourist and as an expat living in Portugal, that you have a lot of support, as you've also alluded to earlier. And that makes a really big difference, because not every country is very welcoming of foreign guests, either tourists or expats. So to not automatically have that tension built in between the locals and the visitors is a really big benefit. And our clients definitely see it because they're very well traveled. They've gone to many other places in Europe. And when they come to Portugal, they say, people smile at you and they ask if you need help. And they go out of their way to try to speak English. The level of English here automatically was something that surprised me from the very beginning. As a former linguist and as someone who has knows firsthand the struggles of learning another language, to see how many people speak English so fluently without having even lived in English-speaking countries is amazing. And so that's one extra level of support that our clients from the US have when they come here. They don't have to struggle to ask for things or to be understood.
Yeah. How have you managed to pick up the Portuguese a little bit?
Yes. So I speak Portuguese with probably a heavy Spanish accent. My Portuguese friends, before I moved here, they allowed me to speak to them in Portunhol. So very rarely have I spoken English with my Portuguese friends. It was either Spanish at the very beginning, and they understand that, and they would just respond to me either in Spanish or in Portuguese, or it transitioned later to Portuñol, and now it is Portuguese but with a Spanish accent.
Let's strip it down a little bit. We know about so many of these different things, but I want to try to simplify it a little bit. Describe your perfect day here in Portugal. What does it look like for you?
Sure. Yeah. So I love to walk. One of my hobbies, and also I guess just a really good activity for mental health and physical health, is to walk long distances. And so a perfect day starts off with no rain in the morning, so I can take my hour and a half long walk and just think and observe and smell and see. And then I'd come back to the office and work a little bit. I'm always connected. I suppose I'm very American in that regard. I'm always connected to work in some way, but it gives me such joy and pleasure. So I really do like that. And having a really nice lunch scheduled with a friend, right? So Lisbon is all of Portugal, but specifically Lisbon is a great place for amazing restaurants in all different scales if you want. Small family owned and operated restaurants to internationally known Michelin-starred restaurants. You have all of those offers here in Lisbon. And so after lunch, I probably would meet up with another friend for coffee by the waterside. And then later on that evening, probably meet up with another friend at a wine bar. And end my evening walking from the center of Lisbon back home. I'm in the Belém Alcântara area. So it's right outside of the hustle and bustle, which is amazing because I get to avoid all the traffic jams, but at the same time, I'm close enough where I can walk.
And you can walk along the river. It's
Yes.
Beautiful, that walk between those places.
I had no idea how lucky I was to find this. I knew that the area resonated with me, and I just happened to find a place that kind of ticked all the boxes of what I needed at the time. But I've fallen even more in love with this area.
Beautiful. It is lovely. You've got the bridge right there, and it's something completely different. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about a bit of food quickly before we get on to your trip that you did recently. What food do you eat now that if you had told yourself a few years ago, you'll be eating this food, you would have thought, no ways, I can't. For me, it's polvo. Polvo, the squid. I always used to look at that and think, no ways, I'm never going to touch that with the tentacles. And I mean, and I love it. I love it. So is there anything for you where you're surprised yourself that you ate it and that you liked it?
You know what? I've always been a very adventurous eater. So I have my preferences for what I want for every day, which is more of a pescatarian-based diet.
Mm-hmm.
In
so you're
Portugal,
in the right place.
I'm in the right place for it. Oh my goodness. Not just because of the variety, but because, I'm not breaking the bank having a whole fish, the robalinho or the dorada, which are lovely white fishes, right? So I'm not in a place where it's extremely expensive to be able to keep up with my preferred diet. So some of the foods that I've eaten have been very rustic and, traditional, and like the food that the workers out in the countryside would have to kind of sustain them throughout the day, are not necessarily my favorite, but I've tried everything. So even cabidela, right? You know cabidela, right?
Yeah.
So
explain to people what that is.
That's one of those secret dishes that I would challenge everyone to try and see if you like it, and then ask what it is. Because if I tell you ahead of time, you're probably not going to try it. All right.
Okay. So for everybody listening, cabidela, don't ask, just eat it.
Just don't ask.
It's the same with moelas. It's the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So no, the food has been. And of course, I had the experience, as I mentioned earlier, in Spain, and there are some of these similar dishes that are there. And before then, I'd lived in Central America, where they have some very interesting combinations. But probably the one thing that prepared me to be a bit of an adventurous eater is that my family's from the deep South, right? So there are lots of the deep South of the U.S. There are lots of really rustic and traditional dishes that we still eat during the holidays. Things that would probably not go well with mentioning on the podcast, because you think about it, it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to eat that, but the taste is great. So yes, food has been great.
Yeah, amazing. again, we could talk about food forever, and it's so diverse, which is amazing. But speaking of diversity, you've just done a cross-country trip through Portugal. So once again, you've just been able to experience firsthand the diversity that we have here in Portugal in such a small sort of geographic area. Tell us a bit about how that started and why you did it.
Sure. So this year, 2020, has been a very unique year for all of us. And with the tourism and hospitality industry, it has completely put us on standby since March. So I have stayed connected with other colleagues in the industry, and I've continued to participate in conferences and different trade shows that we have now started to do virtually. And I continued to get questions from colleagues from around the world. They knew that I was based here in Lisbon, and they wanted to know, well, what is it like traveling in Portugal right now? So around late June and early July, when our restaurants and hotels and museums began to open again, I thought, there's no way I can answer this question, which I was also interested in finding out for myself, unless I actually travel around the country. So I reached out to my friends over at the National Tourism Authority, and they thought that it would be a great idea. And then I reached out to our media sponsors, Travel Weekly in the US, which is the largest B2B travel journal that we have. And they thought it would be a great idea. So I got everybody on board that I needed to, and took off on a 2-week road trip around the country. It was over 1,700 miles that I traveled. Wow. 14 days. I stayed in 12 different hotels. I ate at over 20 different restaurants. I visited vineyards, museums, and everything in between. And it was absolutely amazing. I was a little concerned at the beginning because I wasn't sure how everyone was handling the new health and sanitation measures and different hotels and such. But I very soon realized that Portugal had a consistent plan that had been implemented for all of the tourism, the hotels and the restaurants and such. So it was a consistent experience with everyone. Everyone had the exact same protocol when you would go to the restaurants and hotels. And within the first couple of days, I felt comfortable, and it was great. There were a couple of little challenges. I'd never driven up a really large mountain by myself. And so I had the opportunity to do that. In Florida, we really don't have big mountain drives, right? So I went up Serra da Estrela, and all the way up to the top. There was a hotel that I visited up there. And that was a bit of a personal challenge. So that was good. And I got a chance to connect with hoteliers and restaurateurs around the country and just kind of find out what's their reality been like. And they're doing amazing work to keep people safe, as well as to entertain you and show you a little bit of relief outside of lockdown. So it was great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about COVID because everyone's so tired of COVID, but
yes,
it is a reality for us, and it's going to be a reality for some time. And one of the things that I think is really, without sounding too cheesy, has warmed my heart here in Portugal is we seem to be finding a way to live with this thing without being ignorant of it, and while being respectful of others, and just finding a way to be. And was that your experience with your travels?
It totally was. And I don't think that's something that you can automatically expect until you actually experience it yourself. So as I mentioned earlier, within the first couple of days, I realized that everything was, under control. I totally trusted the properties where I was staying and the hotels where I would go to eat. And people were finding a way to just continue living as well as possible in this current environment. And that by far surprised me. I had no idea I would find such resilience.
Yeah, because it's such a huge part of our culture here in Portugal is the social aspect, the proximity to others. Even the way we greet each other in Portugal, it's two kisses on the cheek.
Right.
We like to be in close proximity to each other. We eat. We spend hours together at a table, drinking and eating. And so you think, how is the culture going to adapt to this new normal? But they found a way, and I find that's something so uniquely Portuguese. We just seem to find a way without losing our identity. And that's appears to be what you've experienced as well.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah, I was very impressed. And also communicating this information. So we had the chance to write 4 different articles in Travel Weekly about my experience. If anyone's interested, you can read the details from day 1 all the way into the last day 14 in Travel Weekly. We were so surprised with how other people responded to what the experience is like here in Portugal. So it's been a really good way to show not just what's going on inside, because, you know, as I would travel around the country, people in central Portugal, northern Portugal say, well, what's it like down the Algarve? What's it like down the Alentejo?
Yeah.
So we were able to kind of help connect those dots, but also to show on an international scale what's going on here. And it's a very, very unique situation. It's not like anything else in Western Europe.
It's difficult, I suppose, for you 1,700 kilometers to sort of encapsulate things, but maybe tell us some of your highlights in terms of places that you went to that stuck out for you.
Sure, yeah. I went down to Sagres for the first time. I had not visited that particular area of the Algarve before, and I was so impressed with how authentic it still felt, because most people think of the Algarve as pretty well developed, tourism based. And I found these little pockets of the Algarve which still feel very authentic. And that was a really good experience that I would like to repeat. Costa Vicentina, which I've mentioned before, is one of my favorites. And it's kind of like one of those hidden secrets. If you have to know how to get there and where to go and what to do to really enjoy it. And I've always really like that area because it still feels a bit remote, and it's absolutely gorgeous, stunning. Like you don't even know where to look because everything around you is so beautiful. I spent some time in Évora, which is a city that I know well, but it was different during the road trip because, you know, we don't have the number of tourists that we normally do. So I walked around the city. I took a tour with one of the local guides there. And she actually had time to explain things that I never knew. And I've taken plenty of walking tours, personalized walking tours in Évora before. But this was very special because she had time, right? So this new asset that we're all learning about this year to really go into depth in the history. In central Portugal, I really, really enjoyed visiting a cute little winery that I've never seen before. Can't believe I'm only an hour away in Lisbon from this winery, Sanguinhão, Quinta Sanguinhão. And the family there is absolutely amazing. And it's the type of place where you can just go and spend half a day and you can schedule lunch with them. And you really do feel like you're having an authentic Portuguese experience because the family's so welcoming. And the daughter who's leading the project is a wonderful, wonderful person, really takes your time with you. Up in northern Portugal, I visited Bragança for the first time. I'd never been there. And there's this really cool project there that's G Posada restaurant, and it is located in the Posada Hotel, and it has a Michelin star. And there are plenty of Michelin-starred restaurants in Portugal, but this one's very special. It's in the area called Trás-os-Montes, and they specialize in highlighting all of the local foods there in these extravagant dishes that they create. And I think it's a really cool way to immerse yourself in the culture at a really unique level of cultural immersion with products that you probably would not have access to. And the story of the family that started this restaurant is very interesting. They're all locals. They employ only local people. And the way that they've been able to put this place, the restaurant as well as the city, on an international map is something to definitely look into, because it was an amazing experience. So there are all of these interesting projects that are happening around the country, even in this time that I was able to check out. And I wish I could go on and on and on about everything that I experienced, because it was quite special. Especially
people can read. People can read what you did, and we'll talk about how people can get it, how people can follow that article and things like that. But let's play a quick little game here. Imagine I'm a Martian. I've never been. I'm jumping out of a spaceship, landing in Portugal for the first time. I need a quick snapshot of the different regions that you went to. So, and I've never been, I don't know what I'm looking at. Describe quickly to me each region. So what would you tell me about the Sagres and that part? How would you describe that to me in a very quick explanation?
Sure. I would say gorgeous landscapes is where you have like the dramatic cliffs that just drop off into the sea. Lots of sunshine, great seafood, nice wine selections, and really friendly locals.
Okay, those cliffs are phenomenal. For people that don't know, that's where the Navigators Fort is as well, is Sagres. They believed long time ago that was the end of the world. They believed that was where the water kind of went over the edge, and that was it. But it's absolutely phenomenal. What about Costa Vicentina? Tell us, how would you describe that to a Martian?
Sure. So you'd have their small little beaches, private beaches almost, lots of nature walks, and small little rustic hotels, boutique hotels that are basically old family homes that have been converted into upscale lodging, and lots of fresh seafood, and again, sunshine and friendly locals.
Good. I'm seeing a commonality here. With, okay. Alentejo.
Sure. So Costa Vicentina is officially part of the Alentejo, but if we're going more into the interior, you would have Roman history that's quite visible still. This would be Portugal's largest wineland area. And you have old school Portuguese homes, and the gastronomy in this area is also quite traditional and unique. Lots of sunshine as well.
Okay. Let's go. I mean, we'll bypass Lisbon because most people in the world would know something about Lisbon, even a Martian, perhaps.
Actually, I didn't spend any time in Lisbon in the road trip.
Yeah. Well, you didn't have to. You live there, so it's okay. The central region?
The central region, you have the largest mountain, or the tallest mountain in continental Portugal. You have also a lot of winelands, and this is varied because the topography changes so drastically throughout the central region. You have interesting pockets of Jewish heritage, which was also highlighted in the road trip, and is something that's really important to us as Americans. And you have different type of gastronomy. So things change. It becomes a little bit more mountainous. I'm not sure if that's the right way to describe it, but it does feel a little bit more interior because it is, right? So you can still find the fresh seafood, but the focus is on other things.
Okay. And then I know north is very, very broad, but you spent I know you went far north, and you also did Douro. Tell us a little snapshot about the north.
Right. So Douro, for this trip, the focus was on water activities because you have the gorgeous Douro River. We also had the chance to spend some time learning about the cave drawings and that's near the Foscoa area, which was really spectacular. I've visited that before, but this is the first time I've had a night visit with a local researcher. So to go down and see prehistoric cave drawings at night down in the valley where they were created with the local researcher was quite spectacular. And of course, there's a big focus on wine in the Douro region, specifically port wine and table wine.
Beautiful. Okay. What a great country we live in. Where do you still want to visit? Where would you still like to, even if it's a tiny little place that you perhaps haven't had the chance? Is there anything on your bucket list?
You know what? I think that I haven't been to Madeira.
Okay.
So, we haven't even really talked about the islands. I haven't been to Madeira. This particular project was continental Portugal only because it was a road trip, so I had to drive everywhere. But I would definitely like to spend some more time in the islands.
Yeah, Madeira is amazing. There's good wine for such a small island. And then there's a very dangerous drink called poncha.
Yes, I've had it.
Yeah, drink in moderation. That stuff blindsides you of note. Cherie, just a little bit about Immersive Global and what you are doing. I know we've touched on it a few times, but maybe you can tell us more about Immersive.
So Immersive Global is a boutique tour operator and destination management company that specializes in very unique experiences for discerning clients. And so it's not like the traditional travel packages that everything's pretty planned out and you just pull out your credit card and pay. This is all tailor-made. And the one special thing that we do, we have two unique selling propositions when we are talking about what Immersive Global is. One is that it's American owned and operated. So we're able to kind of bring in the best of both worlds, where we have a local Portuguese staff that are specialists and experts in different areas around the country, with a bit of an international perspective of what are the types of things that wow people from the US when they come to Portugal. And a lot of it's based on my own personal experiences as a tourist at first here, and then as a resident. And I'm all the time still finding things that wow me. And the other unique selling proposition that we have is that we have a list of really exclusive, highly accomplished professionals, both local Portuguese as well as internationals, who participate in our programs. And these are people who are not in the travel or tourism industry at all. It's really a part of our local network, and a lot of them are personal friends who will come and kind of lend their expertise or participate in some of the experiences that we curate for our clients. So if food and wine is your thing, we bring Europe's top journalist for food and gastronomy onto our programs. He happens to be Portuguese and he lives in Lisbon, and he loves to meet with Americans and talk to them about all of the unique culinary projects that are going on here. We bring on some of our wine producers that have won awards in the US as well as here in Europe for their productions. And same thing with art-based programs and political-based programs. So that's kind of the unique extra that we're able to add. And our theme is that if you can find it in the guidebook, then you don't need us. And we really stand by that.
I like it. That sounds amazing. Cherie, what are 3 things that people can remember and take away from this conversation?
Probably the first would be that Portugal is a very special place. And I think that if you're interested in relocating part-time or full-time, or if you're just interested in visiting a magical place that you will never forget, come check us out. Portugal has a lot to offer. The second thing that I would say a good takeaway is that the country is tiny, as we've mentioned, but there's a lot of diversity. So one of the stereotypes that we've had to kind of fight against in tourism is many people think Portugal is just a 2-day stop in addition to a big European trip, right? So if I'm going to France or Spain, I'll just stop off in Lisbon for 2 days and I can check Portugal off the list. Well, that's not true. I have been here for over 5 years, and I'm still learning new things. And the third thing is there really are places in the world, and this happens to be one of them, where you can find an international community. I've been so surprised at how many people from so many different countries around the world have chosen to make Portugal their home. And so this really does feel like a global community, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, and it said something about the Portuguese people that this global community feels at home here. I think there's something there which is really, really unique and beautiful. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How can people find you online, follow your work, get in touch with you, etc.?
Sure. Yeah. If anyone's interested in reaching out, you can find us, or you can find me at Immersive Global, and that's IMMERSA Global. Website, we're on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. And if you're interested in learning more about the road trip that I recently took, you can read those articles in detail via Travel Weekly, and that's Travel Weekly US, not UK. Travel Weekly.
Okay, we'll put links in the show notes of the podcast and on YouTube and everything, so people can click and follow. Sure. And especially read that article, because it's amazing. It does, because it's so difficult, as we said, but it does really give a nice snapshot into what Portugal is about and how different it is from north to south. But yes, Cherie, a question we ask all our guests: Portugal, the simple life? Why?
Because you have time to live, especially if you're coming from, very busy and hectic city in the US or any other country around the world. You get here to Portugal and you still have all the comforts of being in a major city, in Lisbon and Porto, but you actually have time to sit back and live and discover new things about yourself and to make new connections that you've never had before.
That's true. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Cherie, I've loved this conversation. I look forward to meeting you. You're going to come and visit us here on the Silver Coast soon.
Yes.
So I really look forward. You're going to be my guest for a day. But thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful weekend. And I'm going to let you call it.
That's a wrap.
So thank you once again to Cherie, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. And as we say in Portugal, te próxima. Welcome to the simple life.